Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay. I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk, and I should put a show note at the beginning here. We are actually recording this show a little early. What you're about to listen to is going to publish on Friday. We're recording it on Wednesday. Normally we record the same day we publish, but anyway, if there's any anachronisms where we're talking about something that we would have known on Friday that we wouldn't have known on Wednesday or something like that, that's why. This one.
Rob, I'm confident I will know everything. I know everything I know today that I'll know on Friday. I'm not planning on learning anything in the next 48 hours.
As a professional news reporter, I can't tell you how many times I write something, publish it, and 5 minutes later have the entire thing rendered irrelevant by some turn of events. It does happen. But anyway, that's it. We're going to talk about baby bonds on the first part. And to talk about that, we have Treasurer Thomas Beadle on, mostly because I wrote about baby bonds and then he texted me about it with some enthusiasm. And I was like, hey, let's come on the podcast. We'll talk about it. But baby bonds. So at the national level, there's a debate, and it's a part of the so-called big, beautiful bill that is taking a very tortured route through Congress right now, essentially called Trump accounts. And what they are is, in their most simplistic description, they're $1,000 savings accounts that would be invested for a child. Parents, I think, would be allowed to invest up to $5,000 a year in them, in addition to the government's initial deposit. And then once they mature, the child enters adulthood, they have the revenues from that account. Now, they're calling them the Trump accounts, and that's obviously an attempt to flatter our current president and elicit his support for them. But this is an idea that's been around for a while. In fact, I think more than a dozen other states have implemented something similar to this. And my argument was, whatever's going on at the federal level, the state of North Dakota ought to consider something similar to this. And I did some math on it, and I think it's affordable. We have about 9,617, roughly 9,000 or so, 9 to 10,000. 9,617 was the average from 2014 to 2024. We have about that many live births in North Dakota every year. If the state of North Dakota put $1,000 into an account invested with the Bank of North Dakota for every one of those babies, we'd be talking about $9.6 million a year, about $19 million plus a biennium, and maybe less, because not every live birth, if we put some restrictions on it, say the parents have to be North Dakota citizens for a year, maybe that's less. But I guess that was my argument, is this is affordable, and you put that money away. When children become adults, they could have thousands, potentially even tens of thousands of dollars. If mom and dad kick in even like $25-$30 a month, it could be a big deal. So anyway, after that lengthy introduction, we'll bring on our guest, Treasurer Thomas Beadle. Tom, what do you think about all this?
First off, Rod, thanks for having me. So I think it's interesting. It's an interesting concept. As you kind of previewed, it's something that other states have talked about. Even North Dakota, we have a very microscopic scale of attempting this with the Bank of North Dakota. What we've seen in a number of states, and for a little background, I'm currently serving as president for our National Association of State Treasurers. We have deep dives on conversations of a lot of these topics. 2 weeks ago, we had our Treasury Management Training Symposium in Baltimore. 800 individuals were there for different training and learning activities. And a couple of the sessions we had were on baby bonds and baby bond concepts. In North Dakota, a lot of parents might be taking advantage of the College Save Plan, 529 College Savings Plan through the bank.
And have received, I think, about $600 in matching funds from the state.
Correct. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
so we have that nominal little matching amount that we have from the state where it's like $100 right away, 300 when they start kindergarten, kind of kicks in a little bit to help add up. So we've done that level in North Dakota. Some other states have done similar where they've maybe matched up to 1,000 or whatever. 2 states have gone farther so far with another dozen or so that have legislation working its way through the pipeline. But 2 states, California and Connecticut, which I know we never want to look to as examples for North Dakota, but those are the only 2 states so far that have officially passed baby bonds. Connecticut was the first one to do so coming out of COVID. Their program sets aside $3,200 for babies that are born, but it's targeted. It's targeted specifically to babies, children that are on they call it their Husky health plan, which is kind of their low income health plan, kind of our Medicaid expansion level of coverage. So it's targeted towards the lower income babies there, and it's a similar provision to the Trump savings account, except they don't really let the parents kick much in there. And so theirs is in Connecticut, it's invested by the state. When you turn 18, between the ages of 18 or 30, that individual is able to claim it. In order to claim it, they have to take some financial literacy courses, which is something that I'm a huge proponent of because I want to make sure that you know not to blow this money right away. And the way that you can claim it is for college, buying a house, starting a company, very similar to the provisions that the Trump savings account is asking people to for the intended purpose of what they can access those funds for. The difference with the Trump savings account versus Connecticut or California is it applies to everyone. And so not, it's not just targeting the bottom, most financially incapable people. It's targeting everybody. And it allows for a match of right now of up to $5,000 per year that families could kick in through this tax advantage account that would be able to grow and grow tax free, just like a 529 savings plan. But something that's actually populated by the federal government, which is not something that we have currently.
So, Tom, first of all, I'm struggling with this concept, as Rob knows, but now that I know California and Connecticut have done it, I mean,
Then you're all in favor of it. I know you are all in.
No, but I do struggle, not because I understand why this could be a good idea. I struggle with why this would be a priority, right? When there's other things that I would rather fund. But one of the things that I didn't realize, and you just mentioned it here, so I was under sort of the impression that these baby accounts, you'd get the money when you turned 18, you could spend it on anything. But what you just described there is there are specific uses for it. College, starting a business, some things like that. Like, it's not just the state gives you $1,000, you turn 18, you've got $7,000 and you can buy a jet ski. Right. Would you guys for having some strings attached?
So I think that if that was a route that the state was going to go, I think some strings are important to have there. That being said, we have had a decade plus of recognizing that not every kid needs to go to college, especially not every kid needs to go to a 4-year college. That's where, Superintendent Baszler's platform has been college, career, or military readiness, like get students ready for that next step into adulthood. And so I don't think it necessarily needs to be as prescriptive as like the 529 accounts are. Those are very limited in terms of what you can use them. Now, fortunately, one thing in the big, beautiful bill is they're expanding the ABLE plan. If you're not able to use for a child for 529 for college savings, or if they're a kid that maybe has more mental challenges, physical challenges, whatever, they can convert that into an ABLE plan, which is achieving better life experiences. The bill right now expands that so that you can go from having a diagnosis of up to 26 to now 46. It expands a whole host of areas you can spend that money. So it broadens that scope. I envision that whatever the Trump savings plan, the final product comes out, it'll probably be more like that, where it's a little more of a broader scope. This is still very much in the sausage making process. If we were to look at something like this in North Dakota, which would be a massive lift. I mean, this is it's a very populist position, but it's also just giving money out to people, which is never the best use of people's tax dollars. And so having a little bit of a targeted area there, I think is important. And for me, what I love about it, in terms of a concept, at least to debate it, is when you marry it with some sort of a financial literacy component, where
I
you
like
try to
that.
make sure that people know what the value of that dollar is, what does compound interest do. And one of the nice things about having accounts like this is I think that you get a little bit of a stakeholder society. If you think about Alaska, Rob, I know near and dear to your heart, the dividend in Alaska has a lot of Alaskan residents then paying attention to what's going on. They're paying attention to those dollars. They're paying attention to those funds. I think similarly, if we have a stakeholder society where children are being set up with these accounts and the parents are managing these accounts on behalf of their kids, they will be vested. They might have a stakeholder interest in making sure that programs like this are viable. And so I think there's an interesting thought experiment there on if that's going to be a good solid benefit. But at the very least, we are recognizing that college is incredibly inexpensive, unaffordable. Housing is becoming more and more unaffordable, especially all across the country. But North Dakota, we're not immune to that. Housing prices have skyrocketed over the last decade plus. And so those first time costs that you see for people are pushing some of those life decisions and life experiences farther away. And this might be a way to try to help, flatten that curve a little bit and speed that up. I mean, we've talked about the declining population in America in terms of new births and how we're not having as many new births going forward. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. But if you back it up, one of the reasons might be, well, people are getting married later in life. The average or the median age for a home buyer right now is 56, when it was because the boomers and the Gen Xers are the ones that are buying more of the houses right now because they have the money to spend. First time home buyers have moved from people in their 20s to the age of 38 for first time home buyer for the average across the country. I mean, we're seeing a lot of these life experiences, these key pillars get pushed back, and by helping to help with some costs or providing some sort of a structure like this, might be a way that long term you can see some of those things get back to the good old days, where people are getting married earlier, having kids earlier, buying houses earlier because they can afford to do so.
One of the things that does worry me, because I really like the concept, but I really get worried that when we put it through the ringer of our politics, we're going to put so many prescriptions. I really, by the way, I really like the financial literacy part of this, because I think there's something all the time. I have the Bank of North Dakota College Save app on my phone. I regularly show my kids, hey, this is how much dad has put in. This is how my father contributes as well. Every month, this is how much we're putting in. This is your balance. This is how much it's grown. I really think that's a powerful, I mean, even just that, I think that's a powerful message. And I wouldn't mind like requiring a financial literacy class to access it on the end. I don't think that's such a bad thing. One of the reasons I support this, I have long been a big fan of, Milton Friedman had an idea called negative income tax, he called it. But basically it was sort of a form of a universal basic income. And his argument was, if government programs are, I mean, they're tough to navigate, they're tough to apply for, and then there's all sorts of rules on how you can spend the money. His argument was, we'd be better off if we just made sure people had a minimum amount of money that they could use for food, for whatever. Just let them make their own choices with that money, understanding some people are going to make bad choices, but that's going to work out better in the long run. And I feel like the same with this. Yeah, some kids might blow this on jet skis or something ephemeral that's not really going to set them up long term. But some kids are going to invest in a home. Some kids are going to invest in education. Some kids are going to invest it in other ways that maybe we can't even think of here. And I think that would be really important to something like that, is this flexibility. The problem is selling the public on that to just let people spend this money the way they want to spend it is a tough political sell, because there's going to people because what's going to get the attention are the people who spend it on, a Vegas trip or something, as opposed to something maybe more constructive. And I'm willing to accept that, but I can't imagine how much different my life would be. And maybe I should also describe, I started delivering papers when I was in the 4th grade. I worked at a call center when I was in high school. I worked very, very hard when I was a kid. I bought my first home when I was 21 years old. Put a down payment down, purchased and everything. And part of the reason is I worked really hard. Also, I didn't spend any of my money when I was a kid. I always spent mom and dad's money, and I was lucky, that they were in a position where, I could have fun on their money and save my money. But I can't imagine how much different many people's lives would be, because at one of these accounts, you put mom and dad, or the kid puts even $25 a month into one of these accounts over 18 years. I mean, you could enter adulthood with $30,000 in the bank.
Yeah.
That's life-changing money.
And it's it's the whole there's an app called Acorns that is a similar thing. There's just like a little bit that you can kick in and it'll grow, an acorn tree, right? Like a lot comes out of a small acorn. And it's the same sort of concept here. So my thought process on it, in the big thing is, and the big pushback on it was, it's a little bit of socialism. It's just getting money out there. And so I think that's something that we really have to reckon with too. And that's where there's going to be some consternation around the idea, both nationally and if we do our own.
I don't think
my thought process on it.
Government program is socialism, though.
100%. 100%.
I think it would be more socialism for telling people how to spend it. If we just give people some tax dollars and allow them to make choices with it, I don't think that's socialism.
I like to listen to the conservative and the Republican battle about what socialism as they're supporting Chad, another big government program supporting
Chad, as the expert, you can certainly tell us what socialism is. I know you can do that. So for me, this comes down to the old adage of an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. I mean, so it's the idea that if you can make a smaller investment on the front end, that can you set somebody up for success later on? I serve on the board for the North Dakota Autism Center. One of the big fights we had a few years back was to get insurance coverage for ADA therapy, behavioral analysis therapy. And one of the rationales for it is some of this early intervention for kids that are on the spectrum. If we can get some of these socializing norms, some of these early interventions in there, we can help change the course for some of these kiddos so that they are more independent and more self-sufficient than they otherwise would have been by the time that they are reaching adulthood. And so then if they are more independent, more self-sufficient, then that means that they're able to hold a better job, take care of themselves a little better. They can rely on fewer social service programs down the line, which that's where, if you want to look at the size of the state budget, that sort of area is where we have a huge expense from the state. That's where we have a huge amount of government dollars, taxpayer dollars flowing out. And so, that includes the low income assistance programs, the rent assistance programs, like everything that you can think of that's out there for safety net pieces are all geared towards those of low income or limited means. If by investing in individuals early on, we can change the trajectory for some of those people so that they're not on those assistance programs down the line, and we can give them a little financial education on the way, it might help us get some good cost controls in the future. And that's something that I am encouraged by the thought process. Now, it's very new, even in states that have done it. It's very new, so they don't have kids, actively receiving these dollars. Yeah, they haven't put into their accounts, but none of them have reached 18 to get the money yet. And so, we'll see how it works, but conceptually, that's the kind of the goal.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of going upstream, right? I think what you just described with autism and a lot of the social safety nets we have in place that I don't think we do a good enough job on pre-K and some of those things to solve the problems when they're or identify the problems, right? Early intervention things are very, very important. Struggling a little bit, though, with if this is the right way to do that. And it is interesting to think about, these two states, California and Connecticut, and we talked about them, they're obviously blue states, but we won't know if this is working for another 18 years, right? Isn't that it? Like, it really and that's probably one of the things that makes it really politically difficult is that we want instant gratification. Legislators want outcomes right now, and this is really having to be looking way into the future.
And with term limits, they're going to be even more hard pressed to look long term. I mean, I saw that this session. I had one legislator who was so focused on getting money out for townships that he basically said, "I only got 1 or 2 sessions left. I don't have time to play the long game with the big guys anymore."
Yeah.
And so we're already seeing some of that. And so, that is something that is concerning, as we need to remember that we need to have that generational view on it. It's the same kind of view we're taking with like the legacy fund, where we want to make sure that we're looking for the good of the long term of the state, when over 50% of our state revenue is dependent on oil and gas production. And so what does it look like if that revenue doesn't continue? So we have to make sure to protect funds like that. It's the same thing that we try to look for when we're investing in our K-12 education, and try to make sure that we give those kids the tools so that they can succeed when they graduate. This is just kind of another quiver as we're moving through that whole process. It's going to have some hurdles. It's going to have some challenges. But I think it's a thought experiment that's worth looking at and having a conversation at. And like I said, especially if we can tie it with some sort of a financial education report, because I think that helps pay the difference. That helps really see the benefit.
And I think it's important too, when you start thinking, well, $1,000 for every kid born, it's more affordable, I think, maybe than people realize. $19 million of biennium is a lot of money, but also kind of not a lot of money in the context of the state budget, especially maybe if you funded it with a portion of legacy fund earnings and not tax dollars. I think you could really set something up that funds itself. It goes
Bank
on.
of North Dakota profits, they've averaged taking about $140 million of biennium from B&D profits for the general fund.
We spent $12 million on the Find the Good Life program in North Dakota, and it attracted maybe dozens of people. And I'm not running down the folks who implemented the program, but we've struggled to attract people to North Dakota. That's a generational problem. So I'm not running anybody down. It's a tough nut to crack. I feel like this would be more effective than that. In saying, hey, come to North Dakota, start a family. We're investing in this. I think
this would have a bigger, more direct impact than more North Dakotans than a lot of different programs that are out there. I think that's absolutely certain. And again, we could always look at a different model, more like how, if we didn't want it to be to everyone, if you wanted to more narrowly target it, like Connecticut does, where it's only for people that are on, for them, the Husky Health program. For us, it would be on the CHIPS program, or wherever we want to draw that line. You could be more narrowly targeted there. I think that there is an argument that I'm sure Chad is familiar with from the ESA conversation and everything too, is one of the things that if you set an account up there where the parents get to put so much money in there alongside it, you're still going to create a discrepancy between the parents that are able to do that and the parents that are unable to do that, in terms of what that looks like at the end.
Right now, every kid is getting zero.
Nothing. Right. Everything's getting zero. And so I agree. I think it would be more beneficial towards those kids of doing anything. But those nuances will need to be worked.
I really want this discussion to go forward. And I think part of a larger discussion too, and maybe this sounds weird coming from a conservative, but I think sometimes we make it too hard for people to access some of these dollars that we make available to them.
There's no doubt that's the case.
And I think we put too many restrictions on what they could do with it, to the point where, if you're a person, I guess a poor person, for lack of a better term, and you're facing challenges, and then you have to navigate what at times are these Byzantine programs. And I get it, these baby bonds aren't a curative for that. I just think that sometimes we'd be better off just making funds available for people and then letting them use them in the best way they can. Again, understanding some people are making crap decisions.
It's not just poor people either. It's people who English is their second language. It's people who are working two jobs and don't have time to deal with this stuff. We do need to make sure and we have the same conversation again, back to the ESAs. If we don't have money for everybody, then it's just going to be the people who are connected who are able to access the money, and we need to avoid that.
And we even see parents and families not taking it into consideration their own, savings programs. If you look at, the number of households that don't have a 401k or an IRA type retirement plan set up, it's almost half of the households don't have an account set up, working through it. Now, hopefully most of those, that number is the lower age groups, but it's still nearly half don't have any sort of a retirement account set up. And so if we can try to get people into the concept of saving early, if we can get them into the concept of what, good investment plan is for them and for their future and what they want to do, this gets the whole family to start thinking about it. They
Have you
start
guys
looking at different
considered that
areas.
have you guys considered we should have some skin in the game? It's been a while since we've talked about skin in the game. Maybe that's something we should do here.
I think sometimes we get tempted when we use this money. We want to use it as levers to try to get certain social outcomes that we want. And by the way,
You're trying to use it as a catalyst for behavior you want.
I would argue that one of the reasons why college is so expensive is because we did that. One of the reasons that housing is so expensive is because we had all these government programs trying to incentivize different things. I just think sometimes we'd be better off just giving people money and letting them make decisions. But that's a tough sell. Hey, we got to end the interview there. Thomas, thank you so much. This is such an interesting discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Anytime, gentlemen.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name is Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Just finished up a great discussion with Treasurer Thomas Beadle about baby bonds. But speaking of investments, and specifically investments in North Dakota,
Man, that was a great bridge.
that's smooth. God,
You're a professional.
I do this a lot. All right. We're going to talk about the Legacy Fund's in-state investment program. And I always feel like I have to do a primer with the Legacy Fund because people know that it exists. They don't always know what it is. It is a portion of the tax revenues from oil activity in North Dakota. Gets put in the Legacy Fund. We've been stacking that money up. It's now got billions of dollars in it. Become a revenue source itself. It's kicking off revenues. In fact, we're using some of those revenues for property tax relief. But in addition to it, one of the things, because the Legacy Fund itself, and I think this is where people get confused because they know that the Legacy Fund comes from oil taxes, but then those oil taxes are invested, and those investments generate revenues. Now, in addition to that, an initiative that the legislature started a few sessions ago, was to invest instead of all the different ways that a 401k or an IRA, these sorts of things are invested. One of the things we're going to do is we want to invest in North Dakota, right? Access to capital has been a struggle for North Dakota since statehood. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we have a state bank. We just really struggle to get capital in the state of North Dakota. Former Governor Burgum used to talk about that all the time. Our current governor also, I think, perceives that as an issue. So the idea here is we have the Legacy Fund. It belongs to the people of North Dakota. We're going to use the Legacy Fund to invest in North Dakota. We've been doing that. Now we're expanding it. And here to talk about that is Cody First. She is the director of 50 South Capital, who is a manager of our of the programs, the in-state investment programs, private equity and venture capital investments. Also, Jody Smith from the State Investment Board. Jody, Cody, welcome. And I guess I'll start with you, Jody. Tell us a little bit about the expansion. What specifically is being expanded? What are we doing?
Well, as you already discussed, Rob, this came into fruition in about 2021, where there was a legislation that went through with House Bill 1425, and it directed us to do in-state investments. That was important to us because at the time, what kind of defines our investments is the prudent investor rule. So we had to ensure that we value doing infrastructure and private equity investments within the state of North Dakota, understanding maybe we won't get a 10% return, but we still have such high value in putting that equity back into the state. Over the past couple years, that's shifted. We've had different legislation in 2023 and then again in 2025, directing us to put approximately $1.3 billion into that in-state investments. 50 South has been working with the State Investment Board since I served on the board several years ago, and they've done a wonderful job kicking this off and leading us through this. But RVK did a study back in 2023, and that study said, hey, if you guys want to be able to deploy enough capital by 2030, that $1.3 billion, then you're going to have to start exploring different avenues and going down some some different paths. And so that instigated our team here, our investment team, to start looking at different fund managers that could help us with this private equity. And Grosvenor was the one that was the final pick for the board. So,
Cody, could you elaborate a little bit on what kind of projects the state is investing in as part of having this capital? Are they high risk? Just sort of a general overview of what we're investing in North Dakota.
Sure. So like Jody mentioned, the North Dakota Growth Fund was activated in 2021 as a result of House Bill 1425. And really, 50 South was hired to do two things. One, it's to provide a return for the state of North Dakota. But two, it's really to expand access to private capital for those that are brave enough to start, want to scale, potentially build, or even sell their company in North Dakota. And so our work is way focused on early stage venture capital all the way to buyout type capital or private equity. And so we're working with entrepreneurs who, work across sectors. It might be ag tech, it might be construction tech, it might be insurance tech, it might be exclusively AI, which in 2025, it feels like every tech company is an AI company, but across the technology sectors. And then additionally, some of the legacy sectors in North Dakota, so manufacturing and kind of everything in between. And so when we invest in a fund, we're looking at that fund to source opportunities in North Dakota that are looking for that type of capital to scale. And so the earlier they are, the riskier they are. The later they are, the less risky, but a different type of capital when you're trying to look for growth equity or buyout type capital. And so for us, it's focusing on how do we use the growth fund to really build out the supply chain of private capital that meets the needs of both today's entrepreneurial community, but ultimately the future of what the community is going to look like as the state continues to grow and expand.
One of the Jody, early on you mentioned the prudent investor rule, and that was kind of like a stumbling block a little bit early on, because doing this was really kind of a fundamental change from the way we were doing business with the legacy fund, where previously it was about maximizing returns, right? Like, you want to make good investments, you want to maximize returns for the legacy fund so that we can in turn use those resources in ways that benefit North Dakota. And this was a shift saying, well, we're going to give up potentially some returns because maybe we could get better returns if we invested outside North Dakota. But if we invest in North Dakota, the understanding is that the investment itself is also a return in addition to whatever, revenues we may get from it. So, I mean, as the dust kind of settled on that, because it seemed like that was a pretty hot and heavy debate early on. And now it seems like we're kind of moving forward, like we found our footing with this.
I agree. I think the dust has settled. We just got done with the legislative session, and that wasn't brought up as a concern during this legislative session. I think probably the one of the most brought up concerns was we're not deploying the capital fast enough, right? We have $1.3 billion to deploy. We've deployed a little less than half of that. We'll get questions a lot. What's taking so long? Why can't you get more out the door? And Cody can talk to this probably better than I can. We're not providing a grant. We do expect a return to come back to us. So when you come into the system, you go and either with its 50 South or you're going to work with Grosvenor, they go through a fiduciary review of you. And so they're going to determine whether or not prudently it's worth investing into this company. And that can take time. And I can let Cody expand on how much time that would take. So there's a lot of concepts. There's a lot of ideas that are in that pipeline. But we need to let 50 South and Grosvenor work through that and get through that so that, again, the expectation is we will get a return. But sometimes, when you look at that prudent investor, and I remember this from the 2021 session, the question is, well, what above and beyond that financial return is important to the state? And that's something that we have to be very cognizant of. There's becoming increasing pressure on the legacy fund to perform. I don't know if you guys are paying attention to the DOT budget that went through. I think it was one of the last bills that went through that increased the spending of the earnings up to 8%. That was a shift from a a distribution of about $601 million to $687 million. So it's another $86 million that's coming out of the legacy fund that will go in to provide for property taxes. That's going to help us build roads. It's going to debt relief. Again, all those are very important factors. That as we continue to do that, the risk and the tolerance that we have within that fund shift, and they need to shift appropriately because there's an expectation that we'll hit a return. And so when we say, yes, let's use $1.3 billion of that for in-state investments, knowing, right now I'm looking at year to date, we're at 12.1% return. I don't know that we'll get 12.1% return on our in-state investments, but there is value in that, right? And there's value in investing in ourselves. My husband is an entrepreneur, and I know the challenges that they face and how valuable it is to have them embedded in the communities across North Dakota instead of relocating somewhere else, instead of moving their business to Chicago or to Denver or to Minneapolis or somewhere else where it's easier to acquire those funds.
Cody, do you want to add to what Jody had to say?
Yeah, so we invest really through two strategies. One, we invest in funds. And the reason we do that is that really helps the North Dakota Growth Fund serve as a capital multiplier for the state so that we are not the only limited partner in those funds. And the way that we select, investments in funds is really, one, they have to be what we qualify as a North Dakota venture capital firm. They either have to have a track record of investing in the state or they have to have a partner in state. But two, when we underwrite our diligence, we're looking at how can that fund bring more than just capital to the state. So do they have access to strategic partners or customers for entrepreneurs? Do they have really solid relationships with co-investors? Most entrepreneurs are going to ultimately need more capital at some point. So do they have access to upstream investors? And can they help us continually expand kind of the private market knowledge base in state? So fund commitments take an enormous amount of time, like Jody mentioned. It's really around thinking about the portfolio at a high level and how do we build a diverse portfolio across the strategies funds invest in, the sectors they invest in, and then the stages they invest in so that ultimately it becomes both durable and sustainable from a private market growth standpoint. And then the second way we invest is we do directly invest into companies. We invest through what's called co-investment. So that means that someone in 50 South's broad network of funds is also invested in that company. It helps us de-risk what is exposure to a single asset, but ultimately those direct co-investments, and to date we've done 4, those are later stage companies. They're mature, they've got a ton of employees, they're meaningful presence in the state, they're a meaningful growth in the communities that they live in. And so the benefit of the growth fund is that we're able to do both. We're able to support the ongoing growth through the fund investments, but then really help a company accelerate their capital raise through the co-investment process.
Jody,
me just saying, hey, Cody, do you want to, that's not my turn yet, Rob. So Jody, can you, during the last session, there was some suggestions that we should be doing all of our investing in-house, that we should bring people into the office to do the investment, and that was going to save us a ton of money. Can you respond to that criticism? I don't even know if it's criticism. It was a conversation that took place that why investing outside of the office or, using folks outside the office makes sense for the state.
Yeah. And so right now we are starting to do that. We actually went live on April 1st. And so currently we have the infrastructure to bring $3.5 billion of our $24 billion in-house. We've been hiring appropriate team members. We recently, we're still looking for a CFO if you know of any good ones. And so as we can get our staff up, we'll continue to bring that in-house. Right now, last week when I checked, we're sitting about $500 million that we're managing in-house. Some of that will remain out of us just because being able to create that internal functionality, it's a lot. It's a lot of management and it's a lot of expertise. And the key is you have to have key people who understand some of these complex strategies, right? So we can bring what we'll kind of call the low-hanging fruit in-house. what we wanted to do and what we kind of talked about at the beginning of the session was bringing kind of the next tranche in-house. So with the current structure, I apologize. With our current structure, we're going to save about $20 million on manager fees. So when we get this up and running, by bringing that in-house, we'll save that in those manager fees. We want to go back, and we have our intention to go back during the next legislative session, ask for some additional FTEs, ask for some, really what we need are some operational costs to be covered. And then we can flex some more in-house. That next one isn't going to save us quite as bit as this first one because we brought the low-hanging fruit in. But it's good to bring this in waves, I'll call it, because, as we turn systems on, just like with any system, we're going to have some hiccups. And so it's good to come in and do this slowly and then gradually build up to the point where at most, I think we'd be sitting at about 45% of our investments in-house. We did consult with other states. There's very few other states, if any, that do 100% of it in-house. But we do have some peer states that we've been working with to bring as much of it in-house as possible to save those funds. But again, you need to be able to attract the right talent, and you need to have your systems working, kind of all pistons firing. And we're still working on that in the office. So we'll get there.
Speaking about the timing of all this, and you had mentioned earlier that we're accelerating. I don't know if that was the exact word you used, but maybe speeding things up a little bit. I think one of the, and especially when I was talking about the prudent investor rule, I think there were some lawmakers and maybe some others, maybe even including me, who perceived that maybe as some foot dragging from investment, where they didn't want to do this because we could get better returns elsewhere, and they kind of didn't like this idea of an in-state investment program. And I'll admit, I mean, we're walking up to a line that I don't want to cross. Like I don't necessarily want North Dakota's investments to be driven by politics. In that, we've seen some other places where we see, we don't want to invest in pipelines, or we don't want to invest in oil companies, or what have you. Obviously, those are things that are important in North Dakota. We don't have those values, but I don't want to introduce that. But this is definitely, saying that we're going to invest in North Dakota. That's a political decision, right? And it's made by politicians, and we're trying to get an outcome. And I think it's not a very controversial one. I think it's one that's broadly very popular. But I think that was sort of when I was talking about the change of philosophy earlier. That's what I was referring to. Now, you said that we're starting to accelerate. Talk about that a little bit. What are the things we're doing that are kind of speeding this up and getting us to that, $1.3 billion goal we have by 2030?
That's correct. So, and you're correct. I mean, back in 2021, there was some pressure that was placed on the State Investment Board to do this. There was some political pressure that was placed there. I think whenever you're starting a new program, particularly when you're investing $1.3 billion, I mean, that's a lot regardless of what state you're in. We needed to get the appropriate policies around that. And I think since 2021, I mean, really since the inception of the Legacy Fund, right? That fund has continued to grow. So we have to grow. We have to mature. We have to change as that changes. When this first started, we didn't have a Legacy Fund Advisory Board. Since that point in time, we do have a Legacy Fund Advisory Board. They're the ones that determine the asset class for us. They are the ones that determine essentially the benchmark for us. And they say, hey, this is the end game. This is where we want to go. And then we advise them on that. And then we also step back and we invest for them. So in order to get to the point of deploying faster, then again, what we needed to do is to bring someone else in that could help us to get to that point, but do it very methodically. And so some of the conversation this last session was, hey, can we do those direct investments? Can the Legacy Fund do a direct, say, infrastructure project out of it without using a third-party fund manager? At this point, we cannot. And so at this point, if we had a larger infrastructure project come to us, we would probably use Grosvenor. I'm not saying for sure we would. There'd be the opportunity to go out there and procure a different fund manager, but more likely than not, we would be using Grosvenor because they have the expertise to do that. And we had a lot of questions this last session about how much can we put into infrastructure? Because every time you go back to that prudent investor rule, even with 50 South and even with Grosvenor, right, we don't want to saturate the market. And so we want to ensure that we have that diversity diversity in our portfolio, even within the state of North Dakota. For example, we don't want 100% of what we're investing in to be in pipelines. We also, don't want 100% of it to be in the digital area. And so we have to ensure that even within this in-state investing, we have that necessary diversification to protect ourselves because the market ebbs and flows. We've all been around for a while, right? We've seen what the oil and gas industry has done just in the past 15 years in the state. And those who have survived the past 30 years have seen it go up and down. We want to make sure we're insulating our portfolio enough to withstand some of those ebbs and flows.
Well, some of us have been around more than others, Chad.
Oh, geez, that was unnecessary. You know what? I was going to let you ask another question. I saw you perk up, and I thought, no, you don't get to go now. Cody, can you talk a little bit about, so you've got this chunk of money at 50 South Capital. Do you go, how do you find the places where you want to invest venture capital, private equity? Do you have companies coming to you and saying, I've got this idea, or I'm looking to put together a chunk of capital? Is it a give and take, or how does that work exactly?
Like Shark Tank?
Yeah.
No, but it is a little bit of both, Chad. It's a little bit about people coming to us. I think part of our commitment in state is to be really accessible. And so if there is an entrepreneur who's even thinking about an idea and they just have questions, that they can, find us, and we're willing to do those conversations and calls. I think the other part is, we're active in the ecosystem across the state. So I grew up in a small town, southwestern North Dakota. We live in Dickinson. I spend a lot of time across 94 making sure that we're connected with, the university systems, the ecosystem builders like Grand Sky, Grand Farm, the local economic development folks and communities across the state. We host a ton of meetups across the state to ensure that, again, anyone in that community who is thinking about starting a business or growing a business knows that there's a resource designed for them. And so some of it is certainly us, outbound looking for stuff, and some of it is inbound. And then as we look at fund investments, it's really trying to keep our pulse on where do we see emerging deal flow that we think we're going to need to ensure there's a manager that has the expertise in that specific sector or space to be able to help accelerate the growth of that part of the entrepreneurial community.
And just a really quick follow-up, what's the scope of these investments in terms of dollar amount? Is it an individual investment? Are you putting tens of millions, hundreds of millions? So
it's very different based on the stage and very different based on the company. So with the expansion of the in-state program, the total fund for the North Dakota Growth Fund is $250 million. That just happened. That expansion just happened earlier this year. And so to date, we've now committed over $110 million. That's gone into 7 funds and 4 direct co-investments. Our portfolio has now invested over $150 million into over 20 plus North Dakota companies. And so, if you're an early stage entrepreneur who's raising a pre-seed round, you might be looking for $1 to $3 million worth of capital, where if you're a legacy business who's been in business for 40 plus years and you're looking to sell the majority of your ownership because there isn't an in-house transition plan, that's a very different number that the market is going to, deem how much that business is worth, and trying to find capital to support that.
Last question. Jody used the word saturate the market earlier, and that's always something that I've had people brought it up to me, say, oh, we're going to invest $1.3 billion in North Dakota. Are there enough investment opportunities in North Dakota that maybe match the criteria for risk and some of the other, questions that we would have? Is that a struggle, is finding enough places to put this money? Or and again, when we're talking about numbers that start with billion, trillion, I think it becomes hard to just sort of wrap your mind around what that means. Maybe there is, but is that a struggle? Is finding enough opportunities to invest this money? Nobody wants to take that one? Cody?
I'll let Cody take that just because I don't do the direct investments, but I do think, it's something that when we talk with 50 South and we talk with Grosvenor, we want to know that due diligence and how they will deploy those funds, again, to ensure diversification throughout our portfolio. But I'll let Cody kind of talk to the process that they go through.
Yeah, I think the key thing that we look at is how does the opportunity set continue to grow, right? So the more people who are choosing to take the road less traveled and start a company, how do we continue to help increase that number? So is that college students thinking about taking that? Or is it, someone who's had a successful career at a company and has had an idea for a long time and now decides to go launch their own thing? Or is it someone moving to North Dakota for different reasons and wants to now start a company? So part of it is really looking at how do we continue to increase the opportunity set. But the other part is, this is the benefit of the private market, is that it's in our best interest, it's in the fund's best interest that we invest in, and it is in the company's best interest to be really focused on the return. And so, we aren't just working to get capital out the door as fast as we possibly can. We're working to ensure that we're diligent and deliberate and thinking about the long, long game about how does our work ultimately continue to change the future of North Dakota by bringing incredible companies, backing incredible companies here who can become the next hometown hero of the state that we can all rally around and be excited about.
Yeah. And that's probably a little bit of the tension. And maybe it's not bad tension. Not all tension's a bad thing, but the tension between, hey, we want to get this money out the door and get it invested, but also we don't want to be just giving money to somebody's brother-in-law who walks in the door and says, hey, I got some idea for widgets or something. We want to be careful. We want to be prudent to a point and make sure that we're not squandering money and that these are good investments. Jody, Cody, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Just finished up our interviews. Thomas Beadle, state treasurer. Chad, were you convinced at all? How do you feel? You were skeptical of baby bonds going in. How are you feeling now?
I'm still a little skeptical. And the only, I'm not skeptical of the concept. I understand, and I think Beadle made a good point about going upstream on these things, because that is something, the more we can do to set people up for future success, the better use of dollars it is. I'm still a little skeptical about, is this the best use of our money? But I think the concept, and I think, talking it through, it's worth a conversation. I don't know that I'm completely opposed, but I'm also not completely sold.
And one of the things I think that is worth thinking about is what need for other programs can we reduce by doing something like this?
Yeah. And I also struggle with, we won't see the benefits of this for 18 years, man. How do we keep the legislators, again, who want instant response? They want instant outcomes.
Voters
to continue investing.
And the reason why elected officials have that is a lot of times, that's the expectation from the voters. We're a program like this, you're talking about planting some seeds, and you're not going to enjoy the fruit for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is with something like this. But I think it's forward thinking. I think it's interesting. I think if designed the right way, it really pays dividends. Also, our interview with Jody Smith, Executive Director of the North Dakota Retirement Investment Office, and Cody First, Director of 50 South Capital, about in-state investments. I have a lot of, as somebody who was kind of critical at times of the way state investment officials were rolling that out, I feel like we've got a lot of those things ironed out. I feel like we're really moving in the right direction now.
And I'm glad we had him on, particularly Jody. There's lots during the last session about how the state investment board was not being transparent, or, investing in things they shouldn't be investing in.
He also was not at the state investment board.
No, that's exactly right. So I think the state investment board, it seems to me, is trying to be more proactive and sort of communicating what they're doing. I think that's a really, really good thing to sort of alleviate some of the pressure that, I felt like at times during the last session, legislators wanted to manage every penny of the investment account, and that's not where we want to go.
I think communicating a little better about what's going on is really going to help and maybe tamp down. And in some ways, on one hand, I agree. I think there was some hostility to this from the investment sort of companies at the time who were looking at this thinking, I'd rather chase better returns somewhere else outside of North Dakota. I don't think they really understood that the legacy fund's a political fund. And we're going to make some political decisions with this. And I even want to be cautious about opening that door. But, this is a good thing. I think we got good people in charge now. And I'm really looking forward to watching this continue to roll out. But I feel like we're on the right path. I feel like that's going well. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate that. 2 great interviews. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. That smooth? God,
You're a professional.
I do this a lot.